everyone! Welcome to the first episode of Contact Lost in the year 2022. This marks the beginning of season 3 of the show, where we talk as usual about competitive Warhammer 40k, both in Poland and abroad. I am Tweak, and with me I have my best buddy, Joker.
Hi guys, Happy New Year.
Oh yeah, that's a good thing. Happy New Year, everyone. So listen, this week we had the intention of making a list of top 10 most desired mechanics in 40k. I had the intention of helping you to choose your new army with the new year, but well, it didn't go too well. I created a survey with a list of mechanics, and I asked some of the top players in Poland to rank them, and then I wanted to take that ranking and talk about it. But unfortunately, I was quickly brought down to earth by some of those players who told me that it makes no fucking sense and that it's clickbaity bullshit, and I shouldn't be doing that. So in exchange, I invited 2 of those players to our podcast, and they are going to talk with us about some mechanics that are worth attention. That when you, for example, choose a new army, you should be aware of. Maybe knowing how they work, how they combo, and so on will help you make your choice. So with that lengthy introduction out of the way, I give you Pumba.
Hello, everybody.
And Duda.
Hello.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, the survey didn't really work that well. You told me that it doesn't really work that way, and we should change our approach. So here we are. So Pumba, let's start with you. Over the span of our previous season, so season 2, I've learned that you were an avid Space Marine player, and you know quite a lot about them. You've playtested a lot of builds, lists, chapters, and so on and so on. And yet now you play Thousand Suns. So what has changed? I mean, have some mechanics in Space Marines stopped working? Have some mechanics in Thousand Suns, I don't know, impressed you more? What happened?
That's a complex question, but I'll try my best to answer as well as I can. I think the main problem is the actual power creep of new codexes coming out. When Space Marines were coming out at the beginning of 9th edition, they were considered a very competent and good army, also very well placed in the meta they entered. But the fact of the matter was, even then, comparatively, many of the changes introduced in that codex were actually kind of nerfs from the absolute nightmare that used to be 8th edition Space Marine Codex along with its supplements. Those nerfs oftentimes came from taking away what Space Marines had in their toolkit. I think I will oftentimes mention something like a toolkit, and I think it's important for me to explain what this exactly that means to me. I think of a toolkit as a group of mechanics that army possesses, especially in combination with each other and working together to achieve something. I will give you an example of that. I think one of the most useful toolkits an army can have is charging after advancing, along with charging after falling back. I think those 2 mechanics working together gives you so much mobility, especially talking about melee armies here, that it's almost impossible for me to imagine an army, a melee combat-focused army, without them. And some of these new changes introduced in supplements, especially you can see it from the newer supplements like Space Wolves and Blood Angels, had some of that toolkit taken away from them. As a Blood Angels players, I especially lacked advancing after charging, which many armies got in the game, but not Blood Angels, and also things like 3d6 charges from going out of Deep Strike and reserves. Basically, your surprise factor and your overall mobility on the table got reduced significantly. So you were forced to play a more static game compared to your options, the options that you had previously.
Yeah, you needed a lot of build up to actually get what
Exactly. You couldn't like do many tricks, like especially the tables got smaller as well, so deep striking wasn't very valid. And now if you are we're going to charge from reserves without the 3d6 sure charge, you were pretty much expected, or like your best option was to actually play from the table, which meant the games back then actually tended to be slower comparatively, I think, and more static and more like position based. Especially we are talking many combat armies, and I think combat meta dominated back in the beginning of 9th edition. After many of the armies came out, I think the toolkit that they got vastly outmatched what Space Marines possessed. I don't really think that the biggest weakness of Space Marines right now is that they lack so much in their toolkits. I think many different chapters have the options, like great mechanical options and great stratagems and great chapter tactics to use, but they usually are split between and across many different chapters. So no one chapter has really anything, like everything. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many of the best armies in the game just possess such a incredible mechanical like advantage over them, and this stacked along with the sheer cost of many units in their codexes, just outmatch Marines so hard that they just fell out of meta for me. Comparatively, Thousand Suns are also an expensive army, but they operate in a different way. They have more freedom of choosing what they can achieve during the game. They were given teleportation on, like, you can basically teleport 3 units turn 1 or 1 each turn with Cult of the Duplicity, which is enormous strength an army can have, especially an army that relies heavily on slow infantry like Terminators or Rubricae. They basically work somewhat. They are still an expensive army to field. Like, they don't really have many undercosted, super great effective units, but they can manage their position and their tactical play better currently, I think, compared to normal Space Marines.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we will come back to 2000 Suns at some point, but yeah, Duda, pretty much the same question. I remember since I first met you, I think you've been playing Aeldari, different sorts of, but mainly like the Conclave and so on and so on. And now it seems you've moved to Renegade Knights. So again, what happened to Aeldari and why Renegade Knights now?
So Aeldari, you mean Craftworks?
Yeah.
Is just an old codex right now, and it happens, I guess, always when the meta changes, when the edition changes, that some codexes at some point just are old enough that they don't get up to. And in this case, I started to feel that more and more with every new codex in this edition. So it was hard to play Aeldari, the Craftworks at some point, and then the buff that gave the Knights OBSEC and 5 models on the objective came out. So I decided this is a good moment to just finally drop the Craftworks, which I was maybe sticking too hard to them, but I'm like the player who don't chase the meta very hard, but try to manage something out of army that I have, which is craftworks. But at some point, it really frustrated me that no matter how hard I try, at some points I just hit some armies that I could not possibly, outplay, just out of sheer the power of their codex, just out of the thing that they have the better rules, cheaper units, newer codex, and that was enough. So at some points the game was like, I don't know, you could barely place a potato against me, not the player, and the result would be the same. So it was frustrating, and I found that new knights just are very powerful right now. So, and maybe at some point not so expensive army to get. So I moved to them.
Okay, so when you look at Aeldari, just at first glance, you have small, fairly vulnerable but very quick units. They cast spells and they have like a plethora of spells and so on, but they also excel in close combat with some units. And then you chose Renegade Knights, who again at first glance operate in a completely different manner. So as a very experienced player, did you choose this army because you saw some similarities that I am unable to see right now, for example? Or did you go for something completely different mechanics, different philosophy behind the army? Are those armies similar or are they different in how they play?
They are totally different. So it would be the second answer. I just went for something totally different. Maybe to learn something new, to learn the new point of view of some gameplays, of some mechanics. I think like this, and there was few more factors. Like I like the models. There was not so much players in Poland because now there is a lot of them. But at the point, yeah. But at the point I moved, there was none. So that's a multi-factor thing, I guess. But but in comparison to the craftworks, it's the very different army and different type of play.
Yeah, if I might add something, I think it's important to like amplify that me and Duda are also, when choosing armies, are thinking that about what other players contending for spots in the national team are playing. So basically, if you are looking for a new army, you might look at stuff like strength and what you like in the terms of playstyle, but also something that is not hard, like super played by everyone in the community, because then you're just putting yourself against other players that are competing for your spot in the national team.
All right. So again, we'll probably come back to Renegade Knights and their mechanics at some point. Joker, I have to ask you, because with you, it was like a kaleidoscope of armies as well. Not as big as with me, but still. Thousand Suns, Renegade Knights, Drukhari, now Thousand Suns again. So we spoke about the other two, but Drukhari, what was that romance? What drew you to Drukhari? Why did you pick that army?
Well, it wasn't anything specific. Oh, actually, it was a similar case of what Duda said. So it was multiple factors. To begin with, Thousand Suns at the beginning of 9th were just abysmal. And well, looking at GW data, they had probably one of the lowest win ratios. And then obviously in our scene, you could pretty much not see them anywhere. So I did play a bit of Monster Mash Demons, played a little bit of Knights as well at the beginning of 9th. So when they were easily outplayed in the missions, and I just wanted to try something new, and it was towards the end of 2020, and the Drukhari Codex was just announced, or more like previewed, as the first Xeno Codex that's going to come out. So I thought, all right, let's get into that. So I bought some kits and then received an obscenely powerful book by chance.
So which part of the book was the obscenely overpowered one? Was there any sort of mechanic, for example, just to stick to the theme of the whole episode, that you liked in particular about them?
Yeah, I mean, definitely mechanic-wise, it's the advance and charge thing that you can get on your whole army, and more importantly, you have units that you can utilize with this mechanic. So they are good in combat, fairly cheap, so you can trade well on objectives, and that's probably the #1 reason why they fare so good, or at least did until the balanced data slate, because obviously now the playstyle that most players go for has drastically changed.
All right. Duda, you've probably had the opportunity to play against Drukhari a bunch of times. Was there any mechanic that you hated about them that, probably you didn't like, or maybe they shouldn't even have?
Yeah, the existence.
Their sheer existence. Yeah,
I
many
thought
people.
that's what you're gonna say.
Yeah, many people probably would sign their names under that statement. But no, anything in particular? Because I'm going to be a little bit ahead of myself probably with that question, but it seems to me that what GW does now is it almost seems like every single book is supposed to be stronger than the previous one. Like the mechanics in those books are supposed to be either similar or even better than in previous ones. So many armies now get an equivalent of transhuman, for example. Many armies now, including Drukhari, reduce damage, and it feels like this happens at the cost of the fluff or of the army's aesthetics, even, let's say, because Drukhari was always supposed to be this glass cannon that hits very hard but also gets hit very hard. They weren't supposed to reduce damage, for example. That was the domain of, I don't know, Nurgle or Plague Marines or something like that. Now it seems that those mechanics are mixed and they are part of every single army. So do you think that there is anything that the Drukhari have now that probably they shouldn't have?
It's hard. I guess I disagree with you about the fluff side of the rules, because for me, in case of Drukhari, they all fit very well to what they do, because the -1 to hit you, for example, mentioned, is limited only to the covens, which are known for being tough guys, right?
True. I think I more meant like damage reduction and so on, which now is a thing that makes Death Guard stand out, I guess.
Yeah, but it's still the covens, so it doesn't apply to any squishy units.
Okay, all right. But there are other mechanics that I think may.
Yeah, the Drukhari has all of the mechanics, I guess. Maybe not all, because we now know that some of the new tower units will ignore the invul saves, which
For example.
Drukhari don't have, but they have all variety of all known to the moment mechanics, right? So there are fight first, fight last, charging after advance, charging after combat, -1 to hits, basically everything. So I guess that's broken in this codex. There is no mechanic they don't get, I think, from the set of some known mechanics, right?
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely.
Because we may say that there is a set of mechanics we know in the game, and they are like distributed between the armies. You get -1 to damage, and transhuman you get -1, and Drukhari somehow get all of them. And it would make a sense if it would be like 3 sub factions that are played totally different, but there is no problem in this codex to fit all of those mechanics in one army, and you don't even lose the CP for that because you have the patrol rule, right? So that's the broken combination of things, because maybe even though those mechanics are some kind distributed between the sub factions of Drukhari, you can still fit all of them in one army.
Exactly.
Okay.
For example, which for example, as Pumba mentioned about Space Marines, if you want to have the advance and charge, you have to stake the white scars, and then you lose, for example, I don't know, the Blood Angels or whatever. And in case of Drukhari, you can have it all in one army.
I think the biggest problem in Drukhari right now is that they are actually 3 factions in one. And while most factions would lose much of their power playing together, they can just mix and match whatever they like to. I think it's one of the problems that we've come through Covens into the Witch Cults, into the Cabalites, back to Covens, and still you can just cherry pick, for example, the best character from each of these different flavors of Drukhari, right? You can still bring your absolute monster succubus into your Coven list, and there's no problem with that. I think it's fundamentally broken in this case. I think one of the, in a sense, Drukhari have a unique mechanic, like completely unique mechanic of ignoring detachment rules.
Yeah, exactly. In the game, that basically now starts to be that every faction must be clean, like, you know, only one faction you can use, because otherwise you lose some big trait.
Yeah.
And they don't lose it because they get it anyway. So this is only faction that can mix in the game that everyone else cannot mix because they lose a lot.
All right. Yeah, that is true. That is a good point on that, because obviously you can mix Covens with the damage reduction and then have ridiculous cheap units that just punch through. Right, guys. So let's try and go back to Tweak's initial idea, if it will be possible. So, are there any mechanics or like combos of those that you feel are a must in order for an army to be competitively viable? Obviously, asking that question in a vacuum might not make much sense, but let's try. Is there anything that just stands out and you feel is a must?
Outside of advance and charge, what you mentioned already.
Let's see. I think the big one, as I've told you already, is advance in charge and fall back in charge. I think it's the obvious combo. And the rest is a very hard answer because the mechanics in the game basically rotate around. Each time a new codex or an update comes out, a different army will come out on top, or not, because Drukhari exists, but a different a different meta will shape around those changes
Under Drukhari.
and the Drukhari. For that reason, some mechanics gain significant value or lose significant value with each of these changes. I'm going to give you an example, for example, of -1 damage or transhuman. I remember myself when Dark Angels came out, their combo of just brutal strength and durability along with army-wide transhuman was thought to be absolutely broken and undefeatable, which clearly was proven not to be the case, because that build that abused those mechanics, the Terminators, were painfully slow and actually died pretty good to reroll wounds, which many Drukhari units had. So that was one mechanic basically completely invalidating the other. Your advance and charge, along with rolling everything to wound, made my transhuman completely useless, along with some mortals to add to that. For this reason, I don't think there is a clear-cut answer to this question, and it will be a difficult thing to build your complete understanding and choose your army around, because it will change dramatically with every pass of the meta. For now, I think the -1 damage is the king, and the feel no pains are the king. Especially now that we are seeing the new Tau might introduce ignoring invuln saves, I think feel no pains will still remain extremely relevant, and -1 damage. will still prove to be useful against many weapons with damage 2 that are prevalent. But what will happen in a few weeks even, no one can tell.
Okay. What do you think about? Let's pick some of the mechanics that I had in the form, and let's see if they have high or lower viability either in a combo or not. So let's say
maybe
yeah,
one
go
more
on.
thing about the question that
Sure.
is there any mechanic that is must be? I guess not, because as we can see, there is mostly all of the armies except Drukhari again don't have all of them and still are viable in meta. So one army has those mechanics, one army has those mechanics, and it basically depends on the whole combination of the codex units and mechanics they can do. Because, for example, some army can make heroic intervention, which is cool, but the other cannot, and it doesn't make the army that cannot do the heroic intervention, I don't know,
Worse.
be worse or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it all
So
comes down to if you have units or ways to utilize those mechanics efficiently.
Exactly. So that's the very complex answer, very complex question, because it depends on many factors, right?
Okay, so I think what we've done here, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think what we've done here, what you've just said, that it's a mixture of both mechanics, or a composition of mechanics and units in the army that can utilize them well. I think what we've done here is we created the definition of what I included in my survey that you guys didn't like, and you asked me what it was, which was the army that is in a healthy mechanical state, or a mechanically healthy army. I think this is exactly what a mechanically healthy army would be. So both has mechanics and units that can utilize them. So when I asked
And is not named Drukhari.
and it's not named Drukhari, right. Let's just agree that this is in a separate tier up there, and let's not go back to Drukhari because everyone knows already how we feel about it. But from the other available armies that we have, Pumba, I asked you, for example, which armies do you consider mechanically healthy? And I remember that you mentioned Sisters of Battle, for example.
Yep.
Can you justify that choice somehow?
I think Sisters as an army, although they are pretty cheap, they are in a pretty nice spot that they have their counters, and at the same time they can build around many of their own stuff to beat other armies. And one of the reasons for that is that they have a lot of options to combo their units with stratagems and their chapter, not chapter tactics, but whichever the order mechanics. Yeah, convictions. Thank you very much. So to give you an example for that, one of the most prevalent builds that was playing around was the combination of a Bloody Rose and Argent Shroud. You can make half of your army or a big percentage of your army melee based and give the melee units in your army a huge buff to their melee with the Order Conviction, and at the same time you don't lose the incredible power that the Retributors, for example, have with Argent Shroud, making them ignore moving and shooting weapons. For example, they have advance and charge, but now compared to the old codex, it's limited mainly to Repentious, for example. So you have to make a trade-off. They also operate on a different level, or on a different basis, because they have to be on the board. So you have to give the buff to them, not from a stratagem. I think it's an army that can just utilize their toolkit so well with combinations of their unit. I think it's one of those armies that just don't get everything, but they have specific things, and at the same time their units are competent enough and good enough that they can make stuff work. I think one of the exceptions to that, to what I said, is the bodyguard rule. I think bodyguard rule is not healthy at all to the game as a whole, and I think the biggest abusers of it are the Sisters of Battle, especially if Morven Valvis and Celestine, and their incredible sacrosanct. So I think in overall they are in a great shape mechanically too, except for bodyguard, which I actually hate. I think it's just a terrible mechanic to have in the game, or at least in the form that it currently exists in.
All right. Some other answers that I got to that question was Thousand Sons that we've covered already, and Grey Knights on the other end of the spectrum. Duda, would you agree that Grey Knights, according to the definition that we've built, is a mechanically healthy army?
Oh, I cannot answer this question, I guess.
I think Pumba would love to.
Would I?
He's a fan of Grey Knights. He loves them.
Well, I'm gonna be honest. I don't think that was my answer that I would have given, that the Grey Knights are the best mechanically healthy army. I think they lack, for me especially, and one of the reasons I don't find them this like incredibly good is that they have a limited choice of units that they can take, and I think the army falls apart as long as those two units, we are talking Nemesis Dread Knights and Interceptors, fall out of the meta or get point cost increases. And I think that basically equals that the army is not in a mechanically healthy state. They also don't get the advance and charge that I was talking about, which I think is crucial for the melee army to have. So I actually would not consider them to be mechanically healthy myself.
All right. So yeah, as I said, a couple of people did provide the answers. I think I have yours in front of me now, which said Sororitas, Necrons, and Thousand Sons. So aren't Necrons mechanically healthy? Because again, many people abroad consider this army subpar. Many people wouldn't take it to a tournament because it doesn't like score greatly and so on. So are they in a healthy state, do you think?
Are they mechanically healthy?
Not at all.
You don't think so?
Yeah, I guess we mentioned it already, or maybe not here, that if you remove the OPSEC from this army, this army is gone.
All right.
Just that.
I'm gonna be honest here. When I gave you the answers, I didn't even consider that there's other options in the codex than playing OPSEC Necrons. Like
yeah, of course there is not.
I'm hard coded into just thinking of them as relation, like the expansions or whatever the dynasty, the
Conquerors is the other one, I think, but not relevant.
Like holy shit, I didn't even consider you can take anything else.
Yeah, so if you remove it, this army is dead. So I would not say it's mechanically healthy because it exists only due to all of the units has the OPSEC.
So Duda, do you have any favorites that you'd consider mechanically healthy?
I would say Space Marines, because they have access to mainly all of the mechanics, but they cannot utilize them all at once. So it's healthy that you have the access to all of them, but then you have to choose which one of the mechanics you would like to use. And I think that's cool. And it's a very good army for someone who wants to play in different styles and all like this.
Yeah, and it does a good job of allowing you to cherry pick some of those, because not only you have the like individual chapters with their traits, but you also have the successor chapters where you can mix and match a little bit more. So it seems like, you know, if Drukhari underwent that treatment, probably the meta wouldn't be so dominated by them right now. But that could be a wrong claim, but I'll stick to it.
Yes. Yeah, but you never, at least now, you can never do some broken combination with it. So it's fine because you have the access to all of them, but you cannot combine them into something scary.
Something broken, yeah. I think so. I can agree here. I think even then, I think reaching a healthy state of even mechanically healthy state is just hard thing to identify. I think the mechanics are hard to discuss without the whole of the codex.
And
And
whole of the
even
game.
then, whole of the game, whole of the meta state, and the fact what would you consider a healthy state? Because from as we've discussed, of course, many armies that would have the best combination aren't really healthy for the game, right?
Unfortunately. So coming back to my previous question, which was, I built a premise where I said that in the past there used to be armies that sort of span around a specific mechanic. So like Aeldari, all flavors of Aeldari were supposed to be glass cannony and fast, for example. The Death Guard, they were supposed to be resilient and just sit on the table and be like this immovable object. Do you think that GW should make armies with mechanics that make them stand out? Like, I don't know, the Sisters of Battle and their Miracle Dice, for example? Should all armies have this sort of unique mechanic? Or should we be going that way that all armies sort of have comparable mechanics like transhumans everywhere in every army, and then at some point we would be nearing the state of chess where armies are just so similar that they are almost not different. Pumba, what do you think?
That's another tough one. I think every army is deserving of a super mechanic. I think one of the reasons why Sisters are unique here because they have the Miracle Dice, which are completely unique to them, and that's like their super thematic thing. Performing miracles right there on the tabletop, which I think is a great thing, both in like the way you're thinking about your competitive game plan, and for the very like integrating the fluff into the game as good as you can. And I think the game is lacking in this department very much now. I don't think there's like new armies sometimes have it. 1,000 Suns got their Cabal points, which I love. I just love playing with them. I think they are super thematic as well. That you can just play around in your magic phase as much as you want, basically bypassing some of the problems that magic phase tends to have. But at the same time, many new codexes didn't get those, or at least not in the same manner. And this is why I think you can just smash many armies together and say that they have a lot of similar mechanics. Like rerolling once is a mechanic that's prevalent and is found everywhere now, even in orcs. Even orcs can reroll once to wound currently, which was something that many people thought that the orcs couldn't ever do, like reroll dice, right? They have a lot of them, but they cannot reroll. They are not very. They are not meant to hit very well. But if they introduced many more of these like super mechanics to each army that are completely unique, I think their themes would be much more prevalent and wouldn't get lost in this like mechanic overload that the like Death Guard suffered from. I think Death Guard are a good example here because they were supposed to be the hardest army to kill, like a complete unmovable object, and they are just not. But I'm not certain that the mechanic bloat that every codex is getting is at fault here, or they are just as a victim to the early codex syndrome in which GW was scared to not make them completely unkillable at the time they released. I think if they had something else going for them except for the damage reduction across your army, maybe it would be different.
Mm-hmm. And Duda, what would make you go back to Aeldari now? Obviously a new codex, but in that codex, would you be happy with the mechanics that they used to have, just point adjustments? or anything else?
There should be, yeah. So the main of the codex could be the same. I still think the current codex is still viable, but the craftworks went far back in comparison to the new codex. In case of the stat lines, in case of the mechanics, but I don't know. I don't mean the mechanics like we're talking about, but the basic mechanics. Like they still have the old rerolls. So, for example, the guide don't get you to reroll all the hit rolls, but only the failed ones. So they are still suffering from -1 to hit when you cannot reroll the dice. You know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
So I totally don't get it. Why JW just don't give some errata that would, just adjust those rules to the new basic rules.
Yeah,
So,
for all the armies.
yeah, so that's
true.
That's
Simple
the
FAQ.
very simple thing. It's like give the errata and name that the guide now gives you the reroll all the hit rolls. That's it. So if they adjust the mechanics to be matching the rules from the new codexes, and repair some stat lines, because, for example, the Banshee has 2 attacks and the Witch has 4 attacks, which is very surprising for me. So if they do some adjustments and maybe some cutoff in the points, the codex would be really, really great. And I think would be easily competing for, I don't know, top 5, top 3 armies. But we know GW, it's not gonna happen. But we know that the new codex is somewhere on the horizon, so we hopefully get something new and some cool stuff there. And if if it goes the same way as the new codex as we know, it might be broken. But it's, what can I say?
Yeah, we'll see.
Only might be.
Let's hope not.
Okay, so guys, we've spoken lots about mechanics and what's mechanically healthy. So which army would you say is the least demanding to learn? So obviously mechanics-wise has the lowest skill curve. Pumba, maybe your turn now.
Give me a second here, because that is not an easy thing to answer.
Yeah, we're known for that.
None of these are.
None of these are. It really isn't like a clear topic. If I would give an advice to a newer player to hop in and learn an army, there are a couple of choices here, and one of them would non-ironically be Drukhari, because they have everything. And this is one of the things that you can just learn from. They are not very demanding currently. They forgive a lot of mistakes. And at the same time, you can experience a lot of the game through them. So from that perspective, I think you can learn some of the stuff from by playing them. But at the same time, you won't get super good, because then you are allowed to make many mistakes. So it's a double-edged sword, let's say.
But you also don't lock yourself in a single build with that.
That is true. There's a lot to choose from. A lot of units are viable in this codex. So I think from this perspective, I think it's still a pretty good choice. I think Grey Knights are a good idea as well. I think they have a lot of strengths in their toolkit, and their game plan is pretty straightforward, which is kind of their weakness. And as I said, I'm not a fan of recommending them because they are so reliant upon not a good number of units, and I think they might be up for some trouble with future updates.
Codex Nemesis Dread Knight.
Pretty much, right? So if they get shredded, it might be a problem. Other than that, possibly Chaos or Imperial Knights, as you don't have like super hard time controlling a lot of units. It still requires some macro, but not so much micro. And I have a lot of choices from their households, and the stratagem pool isn't too bad actually. I still find them to be somewhat competitive in this regard.
Right. What about you, Duda? Any recommendations?
So orcs maybe. You can just build the army that you just press the red button and you can erase your opponent from the battlefield. And there are some builds that you don't need to think much. If you just fill up the buggies and just shoot. If that satisfies you.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Still, I think it's still a very complex question because in every army you could do some stupid builds and do some, sneaky builds, and maybe they're better or worse, but still you can utilize the mechanics or not.
Okay. So what about the other end of the spectrum? Which army would you consider the most complex in this sense?
So I guess all the armies that really relies upon the psychic powers, like Thousand Suns or Craftworks, where you really have to know which psychic power to put and when. Because if you mix, for example, sometimes if you mix the combination of those or just choose the wrong unit, it might sometimes just flip the game for the other side for you.
Right. Yeah, I like what Pumba. Sorry,
if I may.
Oh yeah, go on.
So just to add to what Duda said about psychic powers, sometimes if your opponent also has the chance to deny any of them, then you also need to take that into account in what order do you cast them.
And now more and more armies are like, oh, 4-up and your power is denied or something like this.
Free deny, pretty much.
Yeah, and when earlier you had the supremacy, now a lot of armies can deny the crucial power and you're fucked.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say or add is that I love the concept that Pumba mentioned, which is I don't know if intentionally or unintentionally, but of macro and micro. Because when I heard micro, I immediately thought of like RTS games like StarCraft and so on, where you had to micromanage your units so that move back the units that are damaged so that they don't die and they can still fight and so on and so on. And this comes into play when you talk about psychers, where you have to carefully position them, you have to cast the spells in the right order and so on and so on. So it gets very there is a lot of micromanagement in that, it seems. Pumba, is that what you wanted to say, or did you mean something else?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the macro and micro aspects of 40k are often like overlooked or are not mentioned nearly enough. I think the game is still separated, as many RTS games are, into those two categories. Of course, they mingle and they often there's a clear common part to them. But yeah, micro is just moving your units very precisely around. For example, psychers in your psychic phase is a great example of that, or especially in the fight phase, right? And the macro would be your game plan, or just.
So put it the simplest way, the macro is that you know that you want to move this unit there, and the micro is that you position the models in certain places. Like, so the last cannon sees the opponent tank, and these two guys are in cover, and this two guy is within the range of the rerolls, and like this.
Yep.
Right. So Pumba, what about you? Anything you consider most complex mechanics-wise, hardest to learn?
I think I would agree with Duda about the psychic heavy armies. and I also would put Harlequins there. They have some things. They are an army that relies super heavily on their tricks, their mechanical tricks, and their pool of stratagems, especially, to win you the game. Oftentimes by playing the mission, because sometimes they just don't have enough to actually force the opponent off the board. So for that, you have to have incredible knowledge of what exactly you can do with the stratagems and tools you're given. And I would consider that to be a great skill to pilot this army effectively, especially in the field that is just growing hostile to them every day more. So yeah.
Yeah, they're like a scalpel against the hammers that are all around us.
On the other point of view, the Harlequins are like, the less your opponent know about them, the biggest advantage you get.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, they are quite obscure. What about GSC? Do you think that, especially that we are on the brink of having a new codex, do you think that this army is more on the demanding edge, or oh, you just jump out of the ground, boom, your opponent is erased, that's it?
So I would say like all of the combat armies, maybe except the Drukhari, it's always more demanding than not demanding if you play combat army, because the combat phase is the most complex.
The micro heavy.
Yeah, because the positioning and all the stuff is very important. The sliding with the consolidation and pile-ins. So you have to really consider what you do and choose the sequencing of the fighting units correctly and like this. And in case of the GSC, there also comes the part of the coming from the reserves. So this is also tough, to do it properly, because your opponent can screen and you have to know how to, maneuver it out and all the stuff.
Yeah, they basically get 2 deployment phases as well because of their blip markers. So that basically gives you a lot of possibilities, and you have to know exactly how to use it. Otherwise, you might just waste it. And in their current state, because of just the strength of the codex not being there, like the costs and the stats of the units, not like filling your gaps, it might prove very much difficult to utilize the mechanics that you have super effectively. And if you don't, you're just lost. So yeah, I think I agree with TweakU.
Yay! Right. So if you were to name just one mechanic that you hate in the game right now, and that you would gladly see it go away and never be used again, what would that be?
Can I go first?
Obviously.
Whoever decided it was a good idea to put an ignore invuln saves on a freaking railgun with D3 plus 6 damage, adding 3 mortal wounds on top of that, should be fired.
Yeah, that erases any Terminator, right?
Screw Terminators, mate. It erases any big unit. Like,
anything.
Let's say Magnus was pretty much competitively unviable, and now I'm going to forget which box he's in.
I'm gonna correct you there. It erases 2 Terminators.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
One dies
with a
from the
single
shot, and the,
from the
and
mortal
the other
wounds, yeah.
dies from the mortal wounds. Just
yeah, but that's
looking
like
at
the
the
least
first-
worry. But Be'lakor, mate, you've had your time.
Knights, fuck you.
Okay, but these are only it's come to the future, right? So
Yeah.
we don't know the points and all of the
Yeah,
rest.
of course,
So
it's ridiculous in a vacuum. But
that's stupid. What they show, but I guess we could answer the question in the current state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Pumba would agree with me, because he already mentioned it, that the bodyguard rule is really broken and it destroys the whole of the mechanics inside the game, because it's just stupid, right? Pumba,
actually,
you have to agree.
I do agree here, but I don't think like the concept is bad. I think it could work, but in this current state, it's just broken. Yeah.
I think the same, because What should it look like? It's the this unit gives the lookout cell rule even if there is one model only, not
Basically.
three
Yeah,
models,
for
and that's
example.
it. And it would be good,
Okay.
good anyway, but not broken, because now you can have, I don't know, a set of characters in front of your army, and one guy behind the wall, and you cannot shoot the characters because the guy behind the wall covers them. And this is so stupid. This is against the core book so much. It's
So one of the reasons that the lookout server rule completely changed from the 8th edition, and they just invalidated it pretty much.
Yep.
What
So
was it like in 8th edition? I'm trying to think now and I can't remember.
you couldn't shoot a character if it wasn't the nearest at all.
And that was
I'm
better.
pretty sure. Nah, that was garbage. I think.
Right,
I
so-
mean, it was a different meta.
So you could
completely and a
have the,
different
like-
character. But there were also like what it spawned was hero hammer builds.
Yeah.
And they were super prevalent back then. It also came from the fact that the characters were super killy and super obnoxious as well, like especially in combat in 8. I still remember my dear captain, Blood Angels captain with a jump pack and Thunderhammer killing every knight in the game, no problem.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace, but maybe for good. And this basically brings it somewhat back, especially with characters like Celestine or Morven Val, who can even shoot like crazy, right? So it basically, there is a reason that it was changed from 8th to 9th, and Bodyguard just makes it completely disappear. I think if Bodyguard just changed to this unit provides lookout serve for nearby characters, even if it has one model left, for example, right? If it's an infantry unit. Because currently you need to have at least 3 models in your unit to just provide normal lookout serve. Otherwise, you can just shoot the character off the board. And just making Bodyguard move it to 1 model is enough would be completely fine. And I don't think it would be too bad either. There are some other, I think just fixing the keywords also, because the Bodyguard is not a very standardized rule across all of the codexes that have it. Some only provided to your chapter keyword or your dynasty keyword. Then the sisters one pretty much works on anything, because why not, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think just avoiding those huge holes that are abusable would also work pretty good.
Okay. And maybe, well, I think that's going to be my last question. But I made an observation when I was preparing for this that GW seems to favor certain mechanics and to move away from some other mechanics for good. An example of that would be Fight Twice, which in 8th edition there was a plethora of units that had this. Now it is almost completely gone, or at least reserved to just a bunch of units, like a select group of them. Is this observation correct? And is it the right direction that GW is choosing? Or is it a complete misconception? Pumba, what do you think?
I think the strength of those mechanics that are being removed, for example, shoot twice, fight twice, is just a result of the stats being raised. And I think many of the things that we are observing across the mechanics given to everything is the result of just pure power creep of stats on units. I'm going to be honest here. I think with every new codex and release, we are seeing more stats put into the units themselves. And to combat this, you need to introduce mechanics that make the super gun that the one faction just got completely invalidated by an invul save or a -1 damage that, or 5+ feel no pain that someone else just got. It just turned into a obscene arms race, in my opinion. Which, like, I remember when the first codexes of 9th edition were brought into the limelight, and the Marines and the Necrons and even the Death Guard seemed just fair, just toned down from this incredible, like, Death Guard used to have a gigantic mortal spam list, or you could fight twice with any Space Marine, stuff like that, were phased out, and everybody expected this trend to continue. And I think some of the rules designers just broke this trend, and I am not sure why that happened, but it just came from I think now we are in the state that new codex is expected to have a rules bloat, as you would call it, because otherwise it is just gone compared to the ones that came out previously. I mean, Drukhari literally got the fight twice on their best combat units, just at the same time as the codex drop in the Cult of Stride supplement. So you're either removing it completely from the game, or you're just not doing that. And then the codexes that actually were the mechanics were removed from are suffering now because of that, and you are expected to have them. The new railgun is the epitome of what's happening. It has all the damage. It needs to ignore invuln saves because everybody has them. It needs to make the mortal wounds because there's damage reduction everywhere. And if you need stuff removed, you need to have the most obnoxious just ability text that takes 6 lines to explain exactly how dead you are, because otherwise you're probably fine.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think transhuman is also a good example, because when it was introduced with the second 8th edition Space Marine Codex, you could just put it on any Space Marine unit, if I'm not wrong, at least infantry ones, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay. And then they've toned it down, changed it to Primaris.
Correct.
Right. Then they've given it to almost any faction or any supplement, or like spread it across. So you've had it Primaris in the base codex, and then you've had Terminators in Dark Angels. And then it's like, okay, maybe we're giving it everywhere, and that's not a good thing. Let's do a toned down version, like Drukhari have on one of the Coven obsessions, that it only applies to weapons or attacks of strength less than 8. Or maybe let's do the Black Templar one, where it's only 1s and 2s. And after that, when it's reduced and not as effective and commonplace, enters the railgun. Let's just kill everyone, whatever.
And I'm sure we will see something that makes the railgun completely obsolete soon enough.
I don't want to think about that even.
That's good. That's gonna be a thing, because
Aeldari Codex incoming.
as soon as they've started to increase the stats on the units, they had to react with other stat changes super quickly.
Yeah, and that's basically that's the 9th edition in, in, let's say, I don't know, in appeal.
Yeah.
That they gave everyone +1 to save. So then they gave every weapon -1 to do AP. So they gave everyone +1 to damage, and then they gave every weapon +1 to damage.
They increased the amount of wounds to 2 on the majority of stuff.
Yeah. So everyone has +1 to wounds. So every weapon is better damage, and so it's balancing itself. And in total, basically, it's like came to the same spot. Like, yes, because, for example, in 8th edition, the heavy bolter killed the same amount of the Space Marines than right now, correct?
Yeah.
It's like an example,
Good
but
point.
that's what I meant. That's what I mean. But for example, the old codexes in this spot, when everyone has better wounds and better damage, and they are still the same, are falling apart very, very bad, because they don't get the updates until they get the new codex, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's scary to think what's going to come next, because
I already see the rule that says that your invulnerable save cannot be ignored. or
Or
something like this.
or strength D weapons, which I feel is like, history almost.
Yeah.
repeating
If you
itself.
roll 6, just remove the model from
Just
the
remove
play.
the model from the exactly.
But that will come after the unignorable and vulnerable save.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
after
because
that,
then will come the rule that ignores the unignorable.
and then
10th edition.
on 4+
Woo!
flip the table, basically. Right. Yeah, I think this is the good place to finish discussing mechanics and the mechanics bloat. Any final thoughts, guys? Any maybe pieces of advice that you have for people who want to start a new army right now? What or how would you guide them in that? Pumba, your last sentence.
Pick an army that you enjoy the combinations of stuff that they have. If you're trying to pick up a new army, try to play some games with them, with some even net listed builds that you you just proxy your models and play a couple of games with them against your friends that are fine with that, and just try to understand how they actually play on the tabletop, because just reading and how the mix of basically, as I've started, I will finish. If their toolkit that they've got is actually working the way you thought it would. So basically, if you enjoy the style that they are operating, and if you do, just go for it, because the meta will change eventually, and you will never be on the very top of it.
Mm-hmm. Joker, same question to you.
I think Pumba's already answered it. I don't know if I have anything else to add, but yeah, just check which army matches the playstyle you prefer, so that when you play the game, you actually enjoy it.
Yeah,
So you
that's a
can
good one.
watch, I don't know, any games. You can watch the TTS games on the Polish Discord. You'll definitely learn a lot there.
Or play yourself on
Or
TTS.
play yourself, yeah, try that. Or yeah, just borrow some models, try proxying, and give everything a go. See if it suits you, and if it does, then that's what you want to go into.
Duda, any final word?
Yeah, maybe to sum up, because guys answered very well, but if you lose to some army and you understand why you lose and then you like it, this means that you can try this army, because if you understand its mechanics and you like them, it's cool.
Yeah, that's an interesting twist, interesting take. Okay, so I think we're about done with in here. So Pumba, Duda, thanks a lot for joining us again and for providing us with your insights. Joker, thanks for being a fantastic partner on this one. And to all our listeners, as always, remember to subscribe, remember to like. I think Spotify has now an option to rate a podcast, so you would help us greatly if you ranked us there, because we still want to grow and to improve our ranges. So if you can help us with that, we will be grateful. And yeah, to conclude this episode, thanks everyone, and until next time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.